Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Goldfish Report. Yeah, I'm not usually this happy on a Monday, but hey, let's just try something new for a change. Welcome to the Goldfish Report. I'm your host, Louisa, and it's Monday, January 13th, 2020. This is Goldfish Report number 427, and you are back with we're presenting another episode of Political Theater with the Fets, of course. How are you, Jim? Thanks for being here.
Good, Louisa. Actually, our first story concerns the shoot down of the Ukrainian airliner in Iran, which looks as though it was a covert op run by the Israelis, sad to say, willing to take out, 150 plus individuals to embarrass Iran and take out its leading nuclear scientists. This is par for the course for the Israelis.
Well, Jim, I'll tell you, there's a lot of information out. Didn't hear that. I did, see a lot of reports about this. There's a lot of people, of course, there's Canadian citizens who are on that plane. They're also wanting to be involved in the investigation to oversee it. Iran has come out and, apologized. They admitted the mistake. So go ahead and present your stories, your report there, my friend.
Good, Louisa. Good move. Here we have a video that captured the final moment of the missile strike on the Boeing 737 over Tehran. It shows the Iranian missile striking a plane near Tehran's airport. The narrative is changed by the minute, shifting away from the initial theory of a technical error or towards speculation it was accidentally or not taken down by someone, Iranians, Israelis, CIA on the ground. Evidence emerging to validate this latest theory. Here's more about it. Iran has admitted accidentally shooting down the Ukrainian passenger jet. President Rouhani has admitted that the jetliner that took off from Tehran's international airport was, due to human error, shot down. My thoughts and prayers go to the mourning families. I offer my sincerest condolence of President Rouhani. Now, here's a fascinating development, Louisa, that appears to me to put its finger on what's going on. Was Iranian missile operator tricked into shooting down the Ukrainian airliner plane? The Iranian confession their military shot down the Ukraine plane. It is the end of the matter as far as international diplomacy and the media is concerned. The official story that about what happened is this. It's 2 a.m. at January 8, 2020. Our guy is sitting in a TORM-1 air defense missile system about 10 kilometers northwest of the Khomeini airport. Soleimani's been buried the day before. Last half hour or so, a couple of dozen Iranian ballistic missiles had been fired from western Iran at 2 U.S. bases in Iraq. The entire Iranian military is on alert. Stress levels are particularly high. A lot of chatter about a likely U.S. response. Our guys went to several teams positioned around Tehran, tasked with shooting down anything on his radar screen to fix a profile. He starts to doubt he'll see any action. By 6 a.m., the only thing he can report, having seen on his screen, are each of the 9 scheduled flights that departed the nearby airport that night. He watched them take off their normal flight paths, climb to the clear night sky, then veer north to northeast. Since the system he's operated is fitted with identification, friend or foe functionality, could even see their call signals. The last was a Qatar Airways flight headed for Hong Kong. The last flight that night would be a Ukrainian Airlines flight, PS 752, headed for Kiev. Departed an hour late at 6:12, but followed the exact same initial flight path as the previous flight. As it climbed and reached about 4,600 feet, the plane's transponder suddenly stopped working at about 6:14, 2 minutes or so after takeoff. The plane then made a sharp right turn headed east back around to Tehran City. In other words, coming back to return because the transponder had failed to function. For some as yet unknown reason, our guy suddenly became convinced that Boeing 737 was an enemy target. He'd requested authorization to launch. His superiors could not be reached because of problems with the communication network, which may also have been jammed. According to protocol, he had a 10-second window in which to decide whether to launch or not. Convinced it was a cruise missile or enemy aircraft, he launched. Now, Jim Stone and Benjamin Fulford have been on this story, Louisa, and here's a summary from my blog. 2 minutes after takeoff, the transponder communication and lights on the aircraft were shut off, obviously via remote. It flew in this hack configuration for about 4 minutes and 30 seconds before an Iranian ground forces mistook it for a cruise missile and shot it down, with Iran's top nuclear physicists aboard. The plane was sent out during a no-fly order to get the most important people and their families out of Iran before a war broke out, as Iran was expecting. The only question now is who interfered with the communications between the airport, the military, and the pilots, who went dark for a considerable length of time before the missiles were launched. Approximately 1 minute after the first was launched, a second was launched, so the first probably would have downed the plane despite it not being on fire. 8 minutes after takeoff, it crashed. My guess, and this is my guess too, is that Israel is the one who hacked the plane, shut the transponder, lights and radios off, to force it to fly completely dark the way a cruise missile would fly. They are the only ones celebrating. I just mentioned, by the way, that further research has suggested Houthis didn't carry out the attack on the Saudi oil field. It appeared that they were, Iran was being claimed to have done it. That didn't appear to be the case at the time, but I must say, the very precise attack on the oil tanks suggests to me, now that we see the Iranian missiles are very precise, that it may have been a test operation by the Iranians, not conducted by the Houthis, but to see how well their missiles function in practice. Louisa, your thoughts?
I'm muted. If the top nuclear scientist, Iranian scientist, was on board, why would Iran be involved in that? I mean, if it was
they were
test firing.
The guy running the missile system had no idea who was aboard the plane, Louisa.
Okay.
They were getting these people out of Tehran, according to that version of the story, but he was tricked into believing it was a cruise missile or an enemy aircraft and shot it down in accordance with protocol.
Well, weren't all aircraft warned to stay away from the area, though? Commercial aircraft.
This was a 10th aircraft departing from Tehran Airport that morning, Louisa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I had also heard that there was a report that they had all been warned to stay away from the region because of these tensions. So I don't know. But what do you make about this nuclear physicist? Who else was on the plane?
Louisa, I just gave you the flight path of all the 9 preceding flights. I mean, those are there in the slide.
I understand that, but I'm just making a statement. I read a report where they were all warned, all aircraft were warned to stay away from the region. So whatever reason people were flying in and out, I guess they had to. They took that risk. So, okay, Jim.
Oh, I agree that they ought to have shut down all flights. They ought to have done that. But, I mean, that was obviously, in retrospect, a mistake, sure.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, this is new news. I didn't hear this part of the story. So that's all.
Right. This is a late-breaking development and why I wanted to add it to our shows for today.
Oh, this is going to be good political theater coming up next, Jim.
In addition, now, Mike Lee, who is a Republican senator from Utah, Rand Paul, a Republican senator from Kentucky, are both incensed with the insulting, demeaning, worst briefing on Iran they received in relation to the Soleimani assassination. After the nearly hour-long meeting, Lee told reporters a briefing was insulting, worst briefing I've seen, at least on a military issue. The GOP senators were angered when Trump officials suggested a debate over war powers would embolden Iran. Lee said he thought such comments were absolutely insane. I think that's unacceptable. The Trump administration sent Mike Pompeo, Mike Esper, Gina Haspel, General Mike Miley to brief House and Senate lawmakers, reported The Hill. I find this insulting and demeaning to the office that each of the 100 senators in this building happen to hold. I find it insulting and demeaning to the Constitution of the United States, Lee said. according to the Hill. Now, this is a very serious situation for Trump because in relation to the impeachment trial, Louisa, the rules are set by a simple majority of 51. While the Republicans have a 53 number majority, if Mike Lee and Rand Paul side with the Democrats because they now desire to have witnesses, we also have Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski very likely to join them, which is going to transform the impeachment trial completely into one having witnesses. Frankly, I believe that what Trump did here by assassinating Soleimani would constitute a bona fide reason for impeachment. This was a violation of international law. It was a violation of Geneva Conventions, of the UN Charter. This is why they're talking so much about imminence. Under the United Nations Charter, one nation is allowed to attack another, and this attack on Iran's leading military figure was an act of war against Iran only under two conditions. First, if they have permission from the Security Council. Second, if there's an imminent threat. This briefing was supposed to justify the administration's claim that it was an imminent threat, but they provided no proof whatsoever, and even the Secretary of Defense, SB, has seen no evidence, for example, that there was a threat to the 4 American embassies that the president has cited. Here's a piece I published on the assassination of Soleimani, what really happened and why it matters, because it appears to me that Bibi gave Trump a call and told him that Soleimani was a major terrorist figure. I doubt that Trump had ever even heard of Soleimani before. That if he were to take him out, that he'd position him for a triumphal reelection, just as Obama positioned himself for a triumphal reelection by taking out Osama. Now, that was in 2011. Osama had actually died in 2001, where he was buried in an unmarked grave in Afghanistan on December 15, 2001. There were reports in both CNN and Fox News on the 26th about his death. David Ray Griffin has published a whole book about it. I have published a couple of articles about it, including quite a brilliant piece by Nick Kollerstrom, how they used fake Osamas back up to 2011. So that was a fake raid. Soleimani, by contrast, was very much alive. And I believe now the fact that Trump is taking personal responsibility unheard of heretofore. Bibi is saying this was an American op, that Israel had nothing to do with it, is his effort to separate Israel in fear of attacks, especially now they see how precise the Iranian cruise missiles actually are, and that this is a real story behind the story of what we've been told. Here's Haaretz, even Haaretz. And this is a major Israeli newspaper, has reported that Israeli intel helped the United States to take out Soleimani. He actually traveled commercially, as a comment here observed, to do a peace deal with Saudi Arabia, being hosted by the Prime Minister of Iraq. So Trump not only violated, Iran's sovereignty by killing its top general, but Iraq's sovereignty as well. James Corbett, by the way, has done a brilliant piece debunking the claim that Soleimani was responsible for 600 American deaths. Very, very nice piece of work. ISIS has praised the U.S. for the murder of General Soleimani as divine intervention that will help them to rise against. Soleimani had been the key figure in taking out ISIS, not the United States, which had actually created ISIS and was using it as a terrorist army in order to put pressure on Assad and eventually to confront the Persian nation of Iran. So all of this is really in accordance with the American tactics being deployed in the Middle East. Meanwhile, the Iraqi prime minister has confirmed receiving a signed U.S. pullout letter that the United States was going to be pulling out of forces in Iraq. Trump, however, has threatened to cut off Baghdad's access to its New York federal cash. This is really a brutal action by Trump. I'm profoundly upset about it. You talk about a quid pro quo, Louisa. This is as blatant a quid pro quo as you could have. So I believe this would be a second real impeachment item. A third is the sanctions on Iran. because those sanctions represent a form of collective punishment, punishing all the people for the actions of their leaders, just as we did in Iraq, which cost the lives of 500,000 Iraqi infants, where Madeleine Albright, then Secretary of Defense, was asked whether the sanctions had been worth the 500,000 Iraqi infant deaths, and she assured us it had been. But this is all in violation of international law. So there are three distinct bona fide articles of impeachment. What I'm saying is Trump could actually be impeached for something he did that wasn't really impeachable because of what he's done now that actually is. Meanwhile, Trump barred the Iranian foreign minister from addressing the UN. That's completely outrageous in and of itself. To avoid a speech at UN Security Council critical of President Trump's decision to assassinate Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, the U.S. has refused to allow Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif to enter the country for the purpose of conducting UN business. Louisa, this is very embarrassing. This is very bad. I'm very disappointed. I've been a staunch supporter of Donald Trump, but this has pushed me to reconsider my views of him and his, what I now cannot excuse as abuse of power for reasons I just outlined.
Let me see. Oh no, I'm not. I'm sorry. I thought I was muted. Jim, you know that you and I do disagree on this, and I respect your reporting. I respect that there's a lot to the story, but I think there is more to the story. I think if you look at Q, we have to be reminded that there's great support for. Let me just screen share. Look, the Q's been talking about this for a long time. There's a lot of problems that people don't know about. What was really going on there? The mullahs have taken control, the radical mullahs have taken control of Iran, and they are abusing people. I have video I'm going to show you of people that are shot by the people sent by the mullahs into the crowds, into the protesters. There's lots of pictures of people from Iran taking photos, wanting support, wanting to end, because if they go out publicly and talk about it, they'll be killed. So where are you going to get the truth from? There's not as much free press as you think in Iran. You're not getting as much truth as you would like. The people aren't, in fact. But here's the facts. I mean, we have people all over Iran here who are wanting to be freed. Of course, we know that the president, let me just go to the president's tweet that he tweeted in Farsi over the weekend to communicate with people. Here's Dan Scavino's interpretation of it. The people know what's going on. So from the president, he tweeted in Farsi, and it says, "To the brave, long-suffering people of Iran, I've stood with you since the beginning of my presidency, and my administration will continue to stand with you. We are following your protests closely and are inspired by your courage." Oh, that's all well and fine, the president tweets that. But the fact that this tweet has become the most common, it's the most popular, most viewed Farsi tweet on Twitter ever. This is what has been claimed by several sources. It says that there obviously is support for what the president, the actions that he took. The president and the United States consider Soleimani a terrorist, just like they did Osama bin Laden, whether he was responsible or not. They have a policy about dealing with terrorists, and this is how they proceeded with Soleimani. I don't believe that it was an act of war. I don't believe it's an impeachable offense. But you know what? Let Nancy Pelosi, the traitor, let her go ahead and put a trial on, and let the president start calling in his own witnesses, and we're going to find out who the real traitors of this country are. I have also some video here, if I can get my screen share to work correctly, of lots of protesters who have, where's my video?
Louisa,
who've been in the streets.
You understand that why the people are unhappy is because of the U.S. imposed sanctions? Are you aware that the United States has no business being in the Middle East? That
Jim,
we've been given this song and dance about bringing democracy to these countries before?
Don't start yelling. I want the viewers to decide for themselves, okay?
Well, yeah,
I'm not here.
I just explained why I think your arguments are seriously flawed.
Okay, well, let's look at Q again, okay? Let's take a look at what Q has been. Oh, by the way, why don't we just call this what it is? How is this such a coincidence here? That this red ring, there's something about this club just like the Red Shoe Club. Let's take a quick look at this red ring that
But
Soleimani was wearing on his hand and
let me
wonder why Oprah has a red ring on the same finger just like that. And then let's wonder why John Podesta also has a red ring on
oh
his
God,
finger just like that. What kind of
Louisa,
things are going on? No, well, let me finish. So we have another red ring on his hand.
that's a different ring.
Okay, I'm not saying it's the same ring. It doesn't have to be the same ring. But just like the red shoes, what is it symbolizing? What was really going on in Iran? What were the mullahs doing? What are they responsible for? I say we don't have all the facts. That's what I'm trying to say, and I'm asking viewers to keep an open mind before prejudging what they're seeing, because there's more here. Why would Q talk about it if it wasn't? Why? Look what Q's talking about: the shady history of the Iran deal and players involved. Who paid Hussein to attend Harvard Law School? Who is Prince Alawid bin Talal? Why would Prince Alawid bin Talal pay Hussein to attend Harvard Law School? Watch Iran. Something incredible is about to happen. Hussein Rouhani, the good people of Iran have the power. Fight for your freedom. This was posted back on August 28th, 2018.
Louisa, my article was invited by an Iranian journalist. My article has been published in Farsi. You've got the link right there on my blog.
That's not the only
idea.
I understand that, Jim.
The idea of this popularity of this tweet is easily manipulated by the Pentagon and the CIA. They can endlessly repeat 200,000 times the same tweet for propaganda purposes. The guy it was an act of war. This isn't a matter of opinion. This is a fact of the matter. Taking out the leading military figure for Iran when he was on a peace mission at the request of Mike Pompeo and Donald Trump was completely outrageous, and the Iranian PM has been incensed, which of course is why the parliament has voted for the U.S. to get out of Iraq. If Trump were smart, Louisa, he would take this opportunity to get our forces out of Iraq and in Syria, because without them in Iraq, you cannot support them in Syria logistically, and declare withdrawal from the Middle East in accordance with his original campaign promises, and then he would be celebrated and have a landslide re-election, position himself for a triumphal re-election because he's acting in accordance with his campaign promises. This warmongering, this refusal to agree with Iraq and all that is a violation of the very idea you're promoting here. We gave them a democracy in Iraq, and now they democratically want us to lead, but we're not going to do it. How does that add up?
Yeah, well, if the articles of impeachment, Congress was only mad that they weren't consulted. They wanted to draw up additional articles of impeachment for Trump because they weren't consulted, not because, they considered assassinating Soleimani as a war crime. So,
well, Louisa, consulting means they could agree or disagree.
Yeah.
They didn't
But he didn't declare war. The president, as commander-in-chief, can take action against terrorists without consulting Congress, and he did. That's exactly what he did. So you don't have to agree. It's fine. People don't have to agree. But let's talk about how long this goes back. Q is talking about this. FISA is the foundation to investigating the widespread corruption. Okay, message of assurance to the Iranian people. Let's take a look. Regime change coming in Iran. This has been out there. Free Iran. Fight, fight, fight. This didn't just happen overnight. This was published in June of 2018. So there's been problems that we've been talking. This has been part of the strategy. This wasn't just a phone call from Benjamin Netanyahu. There's something going on here that is not being made public. Q is right here trying to tell us what's going on, what's really going on behind the scenes, and sadly, a lot of people are ignoring that.
Well, Louisa, the whole project has been regime change in all these countries. That's what Wesley Clark told us at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco in 2007. The whole motivation behind 9/11 was to draw the United States into the Middle East to take out the modern Arab states that served as a counterbalance to Israel's domination of the entire region, and eventually to confront the Persian nation of Iran. That has always been the game plan. So, there's nothing new about moving for regime change. The question is, do we have the right to do that? I emphatically assert we do not have the right to do that.
That
it's
might
a
have
violation of international law, and we should get out.
Yeah.
As every serious political figure in the United States has been suggesting.
I agree that that was exactly what Wesley Clark said for the New World Order, for the deep state, but that's not what Trump is doing. Trump is cleaning this out. As you can see here, Iran deal about new business for EU and the Black Ops site for CIA. So there are Black Ops sites, there are Black Ops being run within Iran, within a lot of these countries. And what did Trump do? Trump went into Saudi Arabia and he cleaned out the corruption, the bad deals that were going on. And this is about child trafficking, human trafficking. This is about drugs. This is about money laundering. This is about things that aren't out in the media yet, which is why, and the media is not going to report on this. So Trump and his administration, and of course our military, consider him a terrorist and feel that they were in the right. Now, nobody has to agree with that, but I can tell you that they're not going to. No one's, let's see the challenge. Trump is, as a commander-in-chief, able to identify enemies and targets. He says there was actionable intelligence that there was going to be 4 more embassy attacks on U.S. embassies. So, and he stopped that. So the fact that he's not going to tell Congress all of the details. Look, why would you tell AOC? Why would you tell Pelosi? Why would you tell Rouhani, whatever her name is, the Palestinian woman, the traitors? Why would you tell them that inside information? And there's a limit to what they were told. Of course, they're not happy about it because they didn't get the meat and potatoes that they wanted. But you know what? If it's under national security, if it's that highly classified, they're not going to get access to it. So I don't think we should be giving our enemies any more help. That's what I think.
The reason we have a constitution and there's a distribution of responsibility, and the president clearly violated his obligations to Congress. Secretary of Defense Espy has said he has seen no evidence that Soleimani was planning any attack on 4 embassies in the Middle East. That's a Secretary of Defense. So I'm sorry to say, I think you're buying a whole lot of ex post facto justification or rationale that isn't actually rooted in reality. I understand that's the administration position, which you articulate extremely well. I simply think it's not accurate, and it's really a lot of fabrication and an attempt to rationalize an irresponsible act that is going to make matters unquestionably overwhelmingly worse. You got virtually the entire Middle East now in solidarity against the American presence there. And I frankly believe a lot of American lives are going to be expended because of Trump's resistance to getting out at the request of the Iraqi government.
All right, let's move along. Next story.
Okay. Here we have U.S. rebuffs Iraqi PM requests to talk troop exit. It's our right as a force for good to stay, how appropriate in relation to our conversation. Perhaps entirely to be expected, U.S. administration has unambiguously rejected Iraqi Prime Minister Abdullah Mahdi's urgent call for Washington to enact a U.S. troop withdrawal mechanism in Iraq. In a Thursday call to Secretary of State Pompeo, the Iraqi leader urged the administration to send delegates to Iraq to prepare a mechanism to carry out the parliament's resolution regarding the withdrawal of foreign troops from Iraq. Echoing prior statements of Mark Esper, the State Department underscored Friday that it's our right as a force for good in the region to maintain appropriate force posture in the Middle East, which is about as absurd as you get. We're not a force for good. We've been bringing about all kinds of destruction and death throughout the Middle East. America is a force for good in the Middle East, the spokeswoman added. Our military presence is to continue to fight against ISIS. But it was Soleimani was taking out ISIS, not the United States. Meanwhile, and this is a perfect illustration of what we're going to see a lot of, Taliban hit U.S. military convoy, killing all troops. The Taliban have attacked the convoy of U.S. troops in Afghanistan southern province of Kandahar a couple of days after American airstrikes killed a commander of the militant group and several others in the country. That, of course, was Soleimani. Americans are increasingly critical of Trump's record on Iran. Most expect war. New York, Reuters. The American public is increasingly critical of President Donald Trump's handling of Iran after he ordered the U.S. military to kill a powerful Iranian military commander, and a majority of U.S. adults now expect the countries to be at war in the near future. The national opinion poll found 53% of adults in the U.S. disapprove of Trump's handling of Iran, which is an increase of about 9 percentage points from a similar poll that ran in the middle of December. The number of adults who strongly disapprove is 39, up 10 points from December. The response was largely split along party lines, with disapproval up over the past month among Democrats and independents, but did not change among Republicans. The key, Louisa, is the independents. About 9 in 10 Democrats and 5 in 10 independents disapprove of Trump's actions in Iran. Among Republicans, only 1 in 10. 1 in 10 Democrats, 4 in 10 independents, and 8 in 10 Republicans, however, approve. Meanwhile, the House passes a war powers challenge to the attack on Iran. If passed by the Senate, it cannot be vetoed by President Trump. In a vote heavily split along party lines, the House passed Resolution 83, a war powers resolution seeking to limit President Trump's ability to unilaterally attack Iran without congressional authorization, by a vote of 224 to 194. It also opposed last week's attack on the Baghdad International Airport, which assassinated Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. These are significant developments, Louisa. They're not going to go away. I'm afraid Trump, where I was just predicting like 2 weeks ago, a landslide re-election, has now placed his re-election in jeopardy. And it's not because the hardcore base, of which you are an exemplary representative, is going to abandon him. It's because the moderates and independents who actually decide elections are going to be turned off.
Jim, was that it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I just wanted to play a clip here from Judge Jeanine's monologue with Rudy Giuliani regarding this whole impeachment issue, because Rudy makes a very good point. I mean, if we were to let Congress run, you can't have 500 commanders in chief. You have to have. So just listen to what Rudy has to say here, because I think he makes a lot of very good points on this issue. Just take a minute. Computer. Here we go. Okay.
President Trump's attorney and former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, it's good to see you again. Thanks for being here on Justice. Okay, so let's hit it. You just wrote an article this week arguing that the Supreme Court can block this impeachment and the entire Senate trial, I should say, by declaring the impeachment unconstitutional.
Yes.
How do you do that? Explain.
Well, the general theory is, of course, that impeachment is in the hands of the House.
Right.
With unlimited power. Wrong. No such thing as unlimited power under the Constitution.
Okay.
Every constitutional power has limits. So what are the limits of impeachment? It's written right in Article 2, Section 4. It has to be treason, bribery, high crime, misdemeanor, abuse of power, and the other ridiculous obstruction of Congress. You can't find it anywhere in 18 U.S.C. You can't find it under common law. You can't find it in Lithuanian law. It doesn't exist as crimes. So they have rendered the Constitution of the United States and its words meaningless. It's as if they took the Constitution and struck out the words.
Well, let me ask you this, then. What is the remedy? It's like indicting for a non-crime.
The remedy is to go before the Supreme Court of the United States and have it declared unconstitutional. Now, you say, well, there's nothing in the Constitution that allows the Supreme Court to do it. There's also nothing in the Constitution, as you know from early days of constitutional law, that allows the Supreme Court to declare a law of Congress unconstitutional. Marshall made it up. Marshall didn't make it up. Marshall saw it as a necessary, almost obvious suggestion from the clash between the two branches of government. It was necessary to keep government working. Well, the same thing is true here. We have a clash between two branches of government. They are impeaching him for a non-crime, high crime, misdemeanor, low crime, small crime. He's saying you can't do that. Okay. If they are allowed to do the latter, and they can, the former rather, and they can impeach for anything, instead of having 230 years of history with 2 impeachments, We're going to have an impeachment every month. They'll impeach him when the next time he runs.
There's no question that
there's no limit on their impeachment power.
That the precedent is established. As long as you have the votes, you can impeach the guy because you don't like the color of his tie. As long as you've got a partisan vote. I agree, but what is the mechanism? How do you do it? And how do you say that maybe obstruction isn't a misdemeanor or a...
There are also no rules for a trial in the Supreme Court. All it says is, in the Senate, it says there shall be a trial in the United States Senate. Chief Justice presides. What happens at the beginning of the trial very often? The defense lawyer stands up and says, Your Honor, I move for the dismissal of the indictment because it fails to state a crime. Suppose somebody charged me with not looking nice tonight and brought me on trial before the New York Supreme Court. Well, I don't look nice tonight, but I'd move to have the case dismissed.
Well, this is probably what's going to happen because if there is no crimes, the Supreme Court does have the power, Jim, to, to make the decision on the trial if they don't state a crime, they're not going to get impeachment. So I think this is all political theater, like you said, my friend.
Well, Louisa, we know that an impeachable offense is whatever the House of Representatives says it is. This is a political matter. It's not actually a legal one, even though it's within the broad framework of the Constitution. We do know, too, that there could be such a motion to dismiss in the Senate after the articles have been sent over, where Pelosi appears to be playing a political game to try to drag the whole thing out past the State of the Union so that Trump doesn't have the opportunity of the State of the Union to declare his vindication from this political effort to impeach him. That I agree with all of that, even with the idea of moving to, dismiss the charges in the Senate, except that now, as I see it, Trump has actually created bona fide reasons to impeach him with new articles completely separate from the two that they have already passed in the House, related to the use of collective punishment, to conducting an act of war, and other actions that are far, far more serious in my judgment than what we have had going on in the House heretofore. So that's my point, Louisa.
Sure.
I have felt Trump has done a lot of good for the country, but now he's gone way overboard. If he were to pull our troops out in accordance with the Iraqi parliament request, which they're doing as a democracy, for which we claim credit, that would be the right thing to do. And I believe all this would go away and he'll position himself for a triumphal reelection. So my strongest entreaty to the president would be seize this as an opportunity to fulfill your most important campaign pledge, the one that made you president of the United States, namely to get the United States out of these expensive, meaningless wars in the Middle East that don't benefit the United States.
Well, if this was an act of war, why isn't Russia up in arms and getting their military ready to come bomb us? Why isn't the other countries? Why isn't China? Why isn't Syria? Why isn't Iraq? Trying to bomb us? If there's no act of war, I don't see this outrage. I think a lot of people were happy to see this happen. I think a lot of people wanted to get rid of this terrorist, and he's a terrorist. In my opinion, I think he's a terrorist. From the information I've seen, from what Q has posted, the guy was a terrorist, and the president acted within the law. That's what the conclusion that I've come to. Again, it may be early, but it's from what I have reviewed. I don't think he's in jeopardy of that. If it was so imminent, then why is it taking Nancy Pelosi a month to get? She hasn't even given it to the Senate yet. It's not imminent, as you said. It's a political theater. It's all that it is. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes. For sure.
Well, Louisa, it would take a while to unpack what you have been claiming there. I'm making a technical point. This was technically an act of war. It would be equivalent to assassinating General Douglas MacArthur, perhaps because of his political role, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Pelosi's compared it to taking out the vice president, except the vice president doesn't play a role comparable. It might be compared with taking out the speaker if she were of the same party and were politically, influential with the government. Just Soleimani was the major military advisor to the supreme leader of Iran. and it was done on Iraqi soil. That was a violation of Iraqi sovereignty. It was done from the PN. It had been asked to host a mediation between Saudi Arabia and Iran using Soleimani as the conduit at the request of Mike Pompeo and Donald Trump. This was an outrageous act, and it's insulting and demeaning and grossly wrong on a multiplicity of levels. You are well articulating the administration's defensive position, Louisa, and I respect that, but I'm telling you, the weight of the evidence is on my side. I think he has now committed impeachable offenses. I do believe he can make it all go away if he will actually get U.S. forces out of the Middle East, which I highly recommend.
I think we have cooperation for what happened, which is why you're not seeing some international outrage over this. You're seeing people in Iran, by the way, these mullahs are destroying Iran. And if you want to look at what Q says about this, where did it go? Oh, I'm on a different screen. Hold on a second. Let's just take a quick look at what this Iran deal was really going on here. Okay, define terms of the Iran deal. Does the agreement define and confine cease and desist pro to the Republic of Iran? What if Iran created a classified satellite nuclear facility in northern Syria? What if the program never ceased? What other bad actors are possibly involved? Did the U.S. know? Where did the cash payments go? How many planes delivered? Did all planes land in the same location? Now this is where it gets interesting. Where did the uranium-1 material end up? Is this material traceable? Yes. Define cover. What if uranium-1 material ended up in Syria? What would be the primary purpose? Sum of all fears. That's why they said, the president keeps saying, if Iran had a nuclear weapon, he believes they would use it. And actually, you know who said that? Lindsey Graham said that as well today. Okay, in the movie.
That's just loopy. That's just insane.
Okay.
You got a country that hasn't launched a war of aggression since 1775.
And that's perfect. They'd be
and now you're suggesting they're going to start nuking countries in the Middle East. Louisa, look,
because they don't have the military power. They don't have the military power. I don't want to question
your sanity, but this is completely ridiculous, the line you're offering here. Ridiculous beyond words.
Okay. Well, where did uranium-1 go? What was all uranium-1 all about?
We're talking about
why did we strike Syria?
Louisa,
why did we strike Syria?
Look,
I'm following you. I understand.
Louisa, I've got several other stories here that allow you to make the other points you want to make and that are about Iran and what's going on, okay?
Go right ahead, Jim. Let's continue. Because the viewers are not going to tune in just to listen to us debate. They're not going to enjoy the program.
I don't know.
So we need to move on.
I think debates can be important. One of the most important programs in Iran is actually called The Debate, and they bring on different figures. I've been a participant several times. You have to stop the screen share so I can.
Yeah, okay, sorry, Jim, Yeah,
no problemo.
I mean, I don't mind a debate, but, at some point, like an hour worth of a debate of the same issue gets a little bit boring. So let's keep
Iran launches it. Now, this is interesting. We know, of course, about this attack that Iran launched on the Iraqi air bases housing U.S. troops. What's significant about it is that it didn't harm any American personnel. That Iran, it turns out, gave advance notice of the missile attack on the U.S. to ensure that didn't happen. The General Salami, who's replaced Soleimani, is talking about hard, firm, regrettable strikes coming against the United States. He's no stranger to making threats. As recently as 48 hours ago, he said Iran would deliver a painful blow to the U.S. somewhere in the Middle East. It hasn't happened, of course. Iran does, however, have an ability to target its missiles with great precision. And this is a very significant fact that was illustrated by the attack on the oil facility, unprecedented attack, but very precise. And that's what we found going on in Iraq again. Here's a very significant report coming from Israel. U.S. failure to repel Iran attack exposes Israel vulnerability to Iranian missiles, Israeli report. An Israeli military intelligence website says Iran's recent successful counterattacks against the U.S. Ain al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq strikes a note of warning for Israel, as the occupying regime's anti-missile systems are based on American models, which were unable to halt the attacks. Perhaps I should go forward with some other, give you more opportunity for a wider range of issues. UK PM Johnson breaks with Trump on the cultural sites threat. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson distanced himself from President Donald Trump's threats to target Iranian cultural sites, warning it could breach international law. That was a monstrous assertion by Trump to take out 52 sites corresponding to the 52 hostages without mentioning this was simply the Iranian people regaining control of their own government, which the United States had deprived them of by the coup of 1953 in the imposition of the Shah. Now, here's a very good piece by Larry Johnson, The Facts About Iran and Terrorism. When emotion rules the day, facts do not matter. Sadly, that's the reality we confront when it comes to talking about Iran and terrorism. The U.S. government and almost all of the media continue to declare that Iran is the biggest sponsor of terrorism. That is not true. That is a lie. I realize that calling this assertion a lie opens me to accusation of being an apologist for Iran, but simply look at the facts. Here is the most recent U.S. State Department claim about Iran and terrorism. Iran remains the world's worst state sponsor of terrorism. The regime has spent nearly $1 billion a year to support terrorist groups that serve as its proxies and expand its malign influence across the globe. Tehran has funded international terrorist groups such as Hezbollah, Hamas, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It is also engaged in its own terrorist plotting around the world, particularly in Europe. In January, German authorities investigated 10 suspected Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force operatives. In the summer, authorities in Belgium, France, and Germany thwarted an Iranian plot to bomb a political rally near Paris. In October, an Iranian operative was arrested for planning an assassination in Denmark. In December, Albania expelled 2 Iranian officials for plotting terrorist attacks. Furthermore, Iran continued to allow an AQ facilitation network to operate in Iran, which sends fighters and money to conflict zones in Afghanistan and Syria, has extended sanctuary to AQ members residing in the country. You notice what is absent? A list of specific attacks that caused actual casualties. Plans and plots are not the same as actions. If Iran's malevolent influence was so powerful, we should be able to point to specific attacks and specific casualties. Well, you'll not find those facts in the U.S. State Department report because they do not exist. The statistical annex that details the attacks and groups responsible reports the following. The Taliban was responsible for 8,509 deaths and 4,943 injuries, about 25% of the total casualties attributed to terrorism globally in 2018. With 647 terrorist attacks, ISIS was the next most active terrorist organization, responsible for 3,585 fatalities and 1,761 injuries. Having conducted 535 attacks, Al-Shabaab was responsible for 2,062 deaths and 1,278 injuries. Boko Haram was among the top 5 terrorist perpetrators, with 220 incidents, 1,311 deaths, and 927 injuries. It should be noted that local sources do not always differentiate between Boko Haram and ISIS West Africa. Not a single group linked to Iran or supported by Iran is identified. Look at the table from the statistical annex. No Hezbollah, no Hamas. If a country is going to sponsor terrorism, we should expect to see terrorist attacks. The attacks are taking place predominantly from Sunni-affiliated groups that have ties to Saudi Arabia, not Iran, which of course is Shia. In 2016, Iran supported various Iraqi Shia terrorist groups, including Kateb Hezbollah, as part of an effort to fight ISIS in Iraq and bolster the Assad regime in Syria. Iran viewed the Assad regime in Syria as a crucial ally, and Syria and Iraq as crucial supply routes to supply weapons to Hezbollah, Iran's primary terrorist partner. Iran has facilitated and coerced through financial and residency enticements, primarily Shia fighters from Afghanistan and Pakistan to participate in the Assad regime brutal crackdown in Syria. Iranian-supported Shia militias in Iraq have committed serious human rights abuses against primarily Sunni civilians, and Iranian forces have directly backed militia operations in Syria with armored vehicles, artillery, and drones. The United States is upset with Iran because it has thwarted the U.S. covert action in Syria. It was the United States, along with the UK, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, who helped ignite and escalate the civil war in Syria. Why? The Saudis and the Israelis were growing increasingly concerned in 2011 about Iran spreading influence in the region. And what enabled Iran to do that? We did. When the United States removed Saddam Hussein and destroyed the Ba'athist movement in Iraq, the Bush administration thought it was a dandy idea to install Iraqi Shia in positions of leadership. Not one of the key policymakers on the U.S. side of the equation expressed any qualms about the fact that these Iraqi politicians and military personnel had long-standing relationships with Iran, which included financial support. Iran also has a long-standing relationship with Syria. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton decided that if we could eliminate Bashar Assad, the Syrian leader, he's a democratically elected president of Syria, by the way, then we would weaken Iran. This was a policy many Republicans, most notably John McCain and Lindsey Graham, supported. But the scheme to weaken Iran backfired. Iran, along with Russia, came to the aid of the government of Syria in full-blown counterinsurgency campaign, which was orchestrated by Soleimani. Iran, the Russians, and the Syrian government were fighting radical Sunni Islamists, many of whom were funded by the Western Alliance. Iran's military support for the government of Syria clearly rankles U.S. policymakers, but it is not terrorism. It is pure counterinsurgency. Now, here's another thought about this from Ron Paul. President Trump and his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, told us the U.S. had to assassinate Major General Qasem Soleimani last week because he was planning imminent attacks on U.S. citizens. I don't believe them. Why not? Because Trump and the neocons like Pompeo have been lying about Iran for the past 3 years in an effort to whip up enough support for a U.S. attack. From the phony justification to get out of the Iran nuclear deal, to blaming Yemen on Iran, to blaming Iran for an attack on Saudi oil facilities, the U.S. administration has fed us a steady stream of lies for 3 years because they are obsessed with Iran. And before Trump's obsession with attacking Iran, the past four administration lied ceaselessly to bring about wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Serbia, Somalia, and the list goes on. At some point, when we've been lied to constantly and consistently for decades about a threat that we must take out with a military attack, there comes a time where we must assume they are lying until they provide rock-solid, irrefutable proof. Thus far, they have provided nothing. So I don't believe them. Ron Paul again speaking. President Trump has warned that his administration has already targeted 52 sites important to Iran and Iranian culture, and the U.S. will attack them if Iran retaliates for the assassination of General Soleimani. Because Iran has no capacity to attack the United States, Iran's retaliation, if it comes, will likely come against U.S. troops or U.S. government officials stationed or visiting in the Middle East. I have a very easy solution for President Trump that will save the lives of American service members and other U.S. officials. Just come home. There's absolutely no reason for U.S. troops to be stationed throughout the Middle East to face increased risk of death for nothing. In our Ron Paul Liberty Report program last week, we observed the U.S. attack on a senior Iranian military officer on Iraqi soil over the objection of the Iraq government, would serve to finally unite the Iraqi factions against the United States. And so it has. On Sunday, the Iraqi parliament voted to expel U.S. troops from Iraqi soil. It may have been a non-binding resolution, but there's no mistaking the sentiment. U.S. troops are not wanted and they are increasingly in danger. So why not listen to the Iraqi parliament? Bring our troops home, close the U.S. embassy in Baghdad, a symbol of our aggression, and let the people of the Middle East solve their own problems. Maintain a strong defense to protect the United States, but end this neocon pipe dream of ruling the world from the barrel of a gun. It does not work. It makes us poorer and more vulnerable to attack. It makes the elites of Washington rich while leaving working and middle-class America with a bill. It engenders hatred and a desire for revenge among those who have fallen victim to U.S. interventionist foreign policy, and it results in millions of innocents being killed overseas. There's no benefit to the United States in trying to run the world. Such a foreign policy brings only bankruptcy, moral and financial. Tell Congress and the administration that for America's sake, we demand the return of U.S. troops from the Middle East. Finally, here's a nice image. Opposing Iran war doesn't make you conservative or liberal, it makes you smart. Despite the establishment telling Americans otherwise, the United States is marching directly into a major conflict with Iran that will have catastrophic implications. The two-party paradigm's grip on Trump supporters has them shifting from previously supporting Trump's anti-interventionist stance on which he campaigned into full support for a senseless and dangerous war. This is the exact same scenario that unfolded with Obama when he turned the anti-war left into pro-war interventionists. If you stand against this escalation, according to the establishment, you are anti-America, but in reality, you're just smart. I agree with all of that, Louisa. Your thoughts?
Let's see, am I on mute? No, I'm not on mute. Well, you know, in the neocon era, and I don't believe that Trump is a neocon. I don't. And the reason I don't believe that is because he's not following the neocon blueprint. If you see what he's been doing, he brought jobs back to the United States. The neocons have been destroying the country. They've been creating these wars to profit off of. Now, are we at war right now? No, we're not. It's not. We're not going to be at war. And let me explain what's really going on here by Q. Again, I'm going to use Q as a reference here. This is really what's been going on. Okay, so there was a 16-year plan. Where does it say that here? 16-year plan, Uranium One and Iran deal. It's all about uranium. Yes, Jim, you correctly noted Iran hasn't launched a major war because they didn't have the capabilities to do it. But if you have corrupted elements within the United States government who are going to sell out the United States, you can make that happen. And this is how. You can get Hussein in office, right? Because who put Hussein in office? Well, we know this is the story, the backstory. So you want your enemy, this is how vulnerable the United States is to the enemy, okay? And people aren't waking up to this. Here you have the shuttle program that was terminated by Hussein. The United States loses space dominance. Right, so we can't compete.
When you talk about Hussein, Louisa, you mean Saddam Hussein?
I'm talking about Obama.
Obama. Okay.
Because Hussein, okay, because Iraq didn't have a shuttle
That's his
program.
middle name, but I would call him Obama myself.
I'm only reading from the Q post. So this is what's going on here. I'm screen sharing. Can you see this, or is this showing? Okay. Yep. So this is what the deal was, okay? There was a lot of shenanigans going on, as you can see from this Q post. Hussein, Ahmadinejad is talking. Do you know what that means? That means, where did all that money go? How many planes? Where did the planes land? Why were clowns, and they refer to the CIA, private contractors escorting this plane? If this was all up and up, why wasn't Congress notified of this? Why cash? Why offshore cash? Why wasn't Congress notified for approval? Where did the bank wires originate from? Coincidence, all donations to the Clinton Foundation terminated post-defeat? So, looks like someone was returning some money. Okay. What did Australia and UK obtain in exchange for all that money? So what we're talking about here is some money laundering, okay? It looks like to me. Let me continue. Where did the majority of Rothschilds reside? Why is Hussein traveling the globe and visiting major financial institutions? Who are the Muslim Brotherhood? Who is Awan? Who is Huma? Who is Valerie Jarrett? Who created ISIS? Who controlled ISIS? What was the purpose of ISIS? Who is MS-13? Why were known MS-13 members released after capture? Who controls MS-13 and who funds them? Hard to swallow, watch the news. So the next thing you have these people giving uranium to Iran. Ahmadinejad's talking, remember, okay? So we have Iran nuke deal. So you know that the minute Iran gets the ability to launch a war, they will launch the war. because that's the plan. That's the plan. They infiltrated America through, and I'm not saying Iran directly, Saudi Arabia. We know who is responsible for getting Obama, who funded him in Harvard, and who put him into presidency. We're talking about this deep state faction. Obama sabotaged the U.S. space dominance. So, of course, he weakened our military to such a degradation that we had, very little to defend ourselves with. Perfect. Get us in a weakened state, and then give Iran the uranium and give them the ability to attack us. They were gonna do it. That's why the president acted. So this is what it's really about. There's going to be so much more that's going to be revealed about this. But why was Iran? What was the North Korea nuke missile tech? SpaceX, NASA. What was going on with the private server? What was really going on? So what was happening was you had the CIA and you had the cabal who. Let me just scroll here. North Korea and Iran provided protection for the cabal, the elites, and the New World Order. So Iran was part of this. And I have said for a long time that there's a deep state element within these governments, and Trump is trying to clean them out. That's why they're trying to get rid of him. Okay, so I think that Trump took the appropriate measure, knowing what the real threats are. Now, Trump is not going to be able to release classified information to the public. So yeah, he's going to take some arrows because people don't understand the moves he's making. But if you follow what Q is trying to release about this, you will understand the moves that he's making and why he's making them. This information hasn't come out yet. What President Trump's trying to do is he's trying to legitimately and through the natural process of Congress, of litigation, of hearings, to watch it all come out. So the American people can see it for themselves. And that's what's happening. Here they had the 16-year plan to destroy America, and they were doing it because, Jim, if Hillary Clinton was not working for the United States. These people were working for, and let me just show you a picture that I saw on Twitter today that I thought accurately summed this up completely. Okay? This is what we're talking about. These were not patriots. These are the people that were sold out in Congress. These are our representatives who are standing and trampling on our American Constitution, on the American flag, because they've been paid. They've been paid and bought out by foreign entities. And this is all going to come out. That's my only comment. You can continue, my friend.
Well, I was offering a coherent explanation of what has taken place, and you gave a whole list of questions which are not assertive. They're not even true or false. They're suggestive. I'm, definitely at a bit of a loss as to how to respond. That was the flag of Mexico, I take it, in the foreground. Was that the flag of Mexico? Yeah.
I don't believe so. USM, I don't know.
But the idea
are they representing the United States, Jim? Do you agree?
Iran is the most peaceful, great nation in the world today. China isn't launching wars off the top of my head, but no doubt they're involved in a lot of military activities around the globe. I mean, Iran, really, Louisa, we have just a fundamental difference. It's fascinating to me.
Jim, I have no question about the Iranian people. The Iranian people are lovely, loving, wonderful people. The mullahs have hijacked the country, and the extremists who are loyal to them are the ones that you see on the media. I'm sorry, Jim, but I feel like we just are coming from this from two different perspectives, but that's okay. Just keep moving along.
Well, of course we are. Okay. Here's from Paul Craig Roberts, whom I regard as our nation's leading public intellectual on the state of the Iranian crisis. Update. It's now clear that by demonstrating the accuracy of its missiles, Iran has caused Washington and Israel to de-escalate after years of making dire threats against Iran. The state of the Iranian crisis. Readers are asking my take on the Iranian retaliation and Trump's response. I think a deal might have been arranged between Washington and Tehran via a third party. The Iranian attack resulted in no U.S. casualties. Thus, it serves both Iran's purpose of retaliating and Trump's purpose of interpreting the Iranian retaliation to be, in effect, a stand down. Possibly, Trump will apply crippling sanctions as a cover for withdrawal from most of the Middle East. Iran wants the U.S. out, and Trump's original intention was to withdraw before Russiagate forced him to stay. Thus, both Trump and Iran have a common interest in U.S. withdrawal. Although the Iranian missiles killed no one, they did demonstrate to Israel that the Iranian missiles have pinpoint accuracy. As Israel is a small land area, the accuracy of Iranian missiles possibly has changed Israel's mind about provoking a war. If Israel also stands down, perhaps the crisis is over. On the other hand, the neoconservatives will be unhappy. They see chaos in Iran as a way of spreading instability into the Russian Federation. The military security complex will be unhappy as U.S. withdrawal would downsize their profits. U.S. oil interests will be unhappy to lose the Iraqi oil. Trump is in a better position now to stand up to these powerful interests. The war scare has introduced a sobering element. Republican senators have urged Trump to de-escalate. Russia, China, and Turkey have spoken against any escalation. The Barr-Durham investigation of the role of the military security complex and Obama regime in orchestrating the Russiagate hoax brings a sense of vulnerability to the CIA, FBI, and Obama Justice Department. Therefore, Trump possibly can turn the situation to the advantage of his original aim to withdraw from the Middle East and restore normal relations with Russia. Trump's appalling decisions and explanations are largely a product of the vulnerable position he's been put in by 3 years of CIA, FBI, and Democratic Party efforts to remove him from the presidency. Now that vulnerability has shifted to his opponents, unless they physically assassinate him, Trump may yet prevail with his peace agenda. Here's a fascinating part from Pepe Escobar. Trump to de-escalate. It is most unlikely Trump will escalate at this point, and this could provide him with the opportunity to leave the Middle East, except for the Gulf state Trump wants to get out, a U.S. intelligence source says. Pepe Escobar. President Trump will de-escalate the crisis with Iran when he speaks to the nation at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, a U.S. intel source has told me, which did indeed come to pass. Last night, Iran retaliated for the assassination of Major General Qasem Soleimani with missile strikes on 2 U.S. military bases in Iraq. So far, there have been no casualties reported. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said that the ballistic missile strikes launched from Iran completed Tehran's military action. A top U.S. intel source told me this analysis in response to a detailed question. It is most unlikely Trump will escalate at this point, and this could provide him with the opportunity to leave the Middle East, except for the Gulf states. Trump wants to get out. The fact that Israel would be hit next by Iran, as promised among others, by the IRGC, as well as Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, will probably cause them to pull back and not order Trump to bomb Iran itself. Debka Mossad acknowledged that Iran's offensive missiles cannot be defended against. Its secret is that it hugs the ground going underneath the radar screens, referring to the Hovitz cruise missile with a range of 1,350 kilometers already tested by Tehran. What is amazing is that Iraq has allowed U.S. troops into their country at all after seeing over 1 million of their people murdered by the U.S. if we include the 500,000 dead children during the 1990s, as acknowledged by Madeleine Albright. The royals in the United Arab Emirates told me this is because Iraq is more corrupt than Nigeria. Judd Deere, the deputy press secretary of the White House, confirmed on Tuesday night, that would have been last Tuesday night, what I had learned earlier from another source. The White House said Trump, in a phone call, thanked Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani for Qatar's partnership with the United States, and they discussed Iran and Iraq. According to my sources very close to the Qatari royal family, Trump actually sent a message to Tehran via the Emir. The message has 2 layers. Trump promised sanctions would be canceled if there were no retaliation from Tehran, something that Trump simply wouldn't have the means to assure concerning the opposition from Capitol Hill, and that there would be de-escalation if Tehran came up with a proportional response. Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif described the Iranian missile strikes as a proportional response. That may explain why Trump did not go on TV Tuesday night in the U.S. to announce total war, as much as the neocons may have been wanting it. Details are still sparse, but there's ultra-high-level backroom diplomacy going on, especially between Iran and Russia, with China discreet but on full alert. Meanwhile, Trump has announced sanctions calling for peace after the Iran missile attack. President Donald Trump announced he would only level additional economic sanctions in response to the missile attacks leveled by the Iranian government, calling for peace within the regime. These powerful sanctions will remain until Iran changes its behavior, Trump said. The president spoke to the American people at the White House Wednesday morning after Iran launched missile attacks against U.S. military targets in Iraq in support of Trump's decision to kill Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani. The president noted gratefully there were 0 American or Iraqi casualties in the attack. The American people should be extremely grateful and happy that no Americans were harmed in last night's attack by the Iranian regime, Trump said. We suffered no casualties. All of our soldiers are safe. Only minimal damage was sustained at our military bases. Trump called for peace with Iran and sent a message to the people of Iran. To the people and leaders of Iran, we want you to have a future, and a great future, one you deserve, one of prosperity, home in harmony with the nations of the world, he said. The United States is ready to embrace peace. But Trump warned Iran not to continue hostilities against the United States, as the military would continue evaluating further responses to their aggression. He also urged the world to join him to warn Iran from their bad behavior in the Middle East. Your campaign of terror, murder, and mayhem will not be tolerated any longer. The president recounted the history of Iran's funding of their disruptive behavior in the Middle East. Those days are over. The president spoke in the grand foyer of the White House in the East Wing, roughly 20 minutes after the address was scheduled, flanked by Vice President Pence, Secretary of State Pompeo, Defense Secretary Esper, National Security Advisor O'Brien, and other aides. He again defended his decision to strike Soleimani, noting it sent a strong message to Iran they should abandon their attempts to fund terrorism around the world. Soleimani's hands were drenched in both American and Iranian blood. He should have been terminated long ago. The president reemphasized at the beginning of his speech he would never let Iran obtain a nuclear weapon and would continue his maximum pressure campaign against Iran. He condemned former President Barack Obama's nuclear deal with Iran, noting the country used the money to fund attacks around the world. Then Iran went on a terrorist spree funded by the money from the deal and created hell in Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Afghanistan, and Iraq, Trump said. The missiles fired last night at us and our allies were paid for by funds made available by the last administration. There's a lot there with which I disagree, Louisa. It's certainly his administration's position, speaking generally, but the United States has been causing the upheaval in the Middle East. The Iranians have only done their best to defend themselves against those attacks and get U.S. forces to withdraw, which is most certainly their sovereign right. Mute.
There we go. I was on mute. Okay. Yeah, I have a couple video clips that I wanted to share from Twitter that was posted. They're very, very quick. But, this was from Hanif Jazairi. And these are people on the ground taking these videos. It says here that, where's the sound? Iran's people hated Soleimani. They wanted regime change. Scenes of Iran protests tonight. They're taking the posters down. They didn't like him. Let me just continue, please. Okay, I want to continue. Okay, we're going to continue. Here we also have "Death to the Dictator" chanted tonight in Tehran's Azadi Street. Activists say tens of thousands of protesters for regime change across Iran, and this is what okay, I can't independently verify what they're saying, so I'm taking that the person who tweeted this is giving an accurate description of what there is. There's 1,500 of our people were killed in November. This is according to an Iranian who's posting this. Chants of chants in Tehran tonight against the supreme leader and the brutal crackdown on recent Iran posts. And then a tragic picture of a woman, I mean, the blood's just dripping onto the street, that these mullahs had sent their henchmen shooting these protesters. So you can't have any freedom. There's no freedom. So there's many people who, and this is just tweeted, posted all over Twitter, one after the next. You know, over and over again. There was another, here you have the mullahs shooting at the protesters. It's a very, very sad video of two women who were shot down. Do I have that video here? So there's definitely, you know, a difference of opinion here. There's definitely, you know, a large group of people from Iran who are very happy that this has happened. And that, again, as I said, the mullahs are responsible for hijacking this country and for a lot of brutality that obviously is still going on within the country and not being reported by their formal media. They're not allowed to report that. So it's very controlled, it looks like to me. I mean, just looking at the conditions, it doesn't look like they're really getting that much free speech out there, Jim. But I know you do talk to Press TV, which is an Iranian, like if you go to this website, you're just going to see protest after protest, people who are happy, students at the university who chant against Khamenei and his revolutionary guards. So these are people who want change. There's no question about they want change.
If you
Go ahead, my friend.
think the United States has a role to play in the Middle East, and I'm completely dumbfounded, Louisa. I mean, my God, hasn't our experience in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and Libya, and Syria been sufficiently convincing that we have no business being there?
Yeah,
the idea of dictating what goes on in Iran is completely insane, completely insane.
Yeah,
I agree that propaganda has a powerful influence on the weak-minded, and that sorting these things out requires serious, rigorous thought and research. Mm-hmm. I'm very distressed that you seem to be played.
No, I don't think we have the same president in office. We went into Iran for a different reason, not the reason the neocons want to go in there, not the reason Benjamin Netanyahu went in there. We went in there for a different reason. And if President Trump has intelligence that they were going to continue to attack us and that they have the uranium, they're using uranium, they're enriching uranium, and they're ready to use it, then you know what, Jim? He has an obligation to protect our country. And I'm sorry if you disagree with that, but I agree with him.
Well, you're making a lot of assumptions, Louisa, for which we have no available evidence. I'm just
okay. You've made some assumptions too, Jim.
Sorry.
You've made assumptions too.
You have to base your reasoning on available evidence, and you're basing it on a lot of speculation for which I see no support at all. It's a nice story, but whether it has any resemblance or proximity to reality is a completely separate question.
Well, Jim, in our last remaining few moments, did you want to have any other comments or stories? Because it's we're moving along.
Oh, have we reached the point of time? All right. Let me see. Maybe there's one more story we could squeeze in before we... Here. Trump threatens war crime against Iran. Congress must stop him. Human rights and global wars. Trump has already committed the crime of aggression against Iran, and he's now threatening to create a war crime if he carries through his January 4th promise to target Iran's cultural sites. The United States has violated the UN Charter's prohibition on the use of military force. This is the time to raise our voices and demand that our congressional representatives put a halt to Trump's illegal war-making. It should be clear to any legal analyst that Donald Trump's catastrophic decision to order the illegal assassination of Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani and Iraqi senior military leader Abdul Mahad al-Mohandes constituted a crime of aggression and violated both the United Nations Charter and the U.S. War Powers Resolution. The January 2nd drone attack that killed Soleimani, al-Mohandes, and al-Mohandes' public relations chief were the deadliest escalation of Trump's maximum pressure campaign against Iran since his May 18, 2018 withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal. May 2019, 1 year after Trump pulled out of the agreement, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo claimed U.S. intelligence had concluded that Iranian-sponsored attacks on U.S. military personnel were imminent. The New York Times said the administration made that allegation without evidence to support it. Iran holds all the cards in coming Middle East conflict with the U.S. unless Trump is willing to drop a tactical nuke. This is from Scott Ritter. It's a very interesting and thoroughgoing piece about it, but where Trump has actually sent 6 B-52s to Diego Garcia past Iran, but which could be used to drop nukes on Iran, which would be a great catastrophe, Louisa. Let us hope it doesn't come to this, but I'm very worried that Trump has gone over to the dark side.
Well, Jim, I don't think Trump wants war, or he would have started it. He would have already done this. We did not. There was no casualties. There were no civilian casualties. It was a very targeted strike. He obviously wanted to remove the terrorist. He doesn't want to hurt the Iranian people. I don't think we're going to go to war. I think that there's a lot of strategy, a lot of political posturing going on. But I think that there will be calmer heads prevailing. And it's not an opinion when you have funds being flown, hard cash being flown in planes over to Iran. It's not an opinion and not an assumption when the Clinton Foundation has to return all these funds. It's not an assumption that the uranium one ended up over in Iran. These are not assumptions. So we need to know more about what's really going on behind the scenes. And Jim, this was another episode of political theater, my friends. That was like a marathon. So I appreciate you being with me, Jim. More political theater next week, folks, if you are up for it. So bring your popcorn. Thank you, Jim.
You got it, Louisa.
We'll see you next week, folks, for another episode of Political Theater with the Feds. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.